Welcome to Positive Disintegration, a path to authenticity. In this episode, we're talking to Summer Cowick about all things overexcitability, giftedness, and teaching. We'll talk about overexcitabilities in the classroom, gifted education, intersectionality, and the education system itself. The big lesson that came out for me in this episode is the importance of authenticity, whether it be for the students or for the teachers trying to help them. So if you're a teacher, a parent of a gifted child, or if you have overexcitabilities, I'm sure you're going to find something of interest for you. And as a bonus, we have some more outtakes for you at the very end. So stick around. Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to Positive Disintegration. I'm Emma Nicholson.
I'm Dr. Chris Wells.
Chris, today we're having a conversation about education.
That's right. Today we're going to talk about the application of overexcitabilities and Dąbrowski's theory in the classroom, which is something that we haven't really had yet on the podcast, I don't think.
So for our listeners, our guest today is Summer Cowick. Summer is a St. Louis native and is an educator with over 15 years' experience in the classroom. She has worked exclusively in low-income and Title I schools, serving students in suburban and urban settings. Her expertise lies in the area of identification, particularly of underrepresented populations such as Hispanic and African American students, and overexcitabilities in Dąbrowski's theory. Welcome to the podcast, Summer.
Well, thank you very much. I feel I need to change my verbiage too. I learned that from Chris, I think at the very last time we met.
Did that come up?
I think so. I think you were talking about how you made it a point where it's not a theory of overexcitabilities, it's a piece of the bigger theory. And I was like, oh yeah.
It's very common for people to say theory of overexcitabilities, which is understandable. I mean, I understand why people do it, but we definitely try to discourage it here. So Summer, I have to tell people how we met because we met at such a high pressure moment for me. It was NAGC 2022, and I was sitting there at the overexcitabilities panel with Ann Wren and Aaron Miller. It was just about to start, and I was nervous, and I'm just like, breathe, be calm. And you came up to me and asked if you could sit next to me on the floor because the room was full, and that you were a huge podcast fan. And I thought to myself, hell yeah, you can sit here next to me on the floor, a huge podcast fan. Please do with your positive energy. And it was a great session. And so I want to say that it worked. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. There were a couple of times, I guess to back up, I get a little frustrated when people kind of downplay or kind of poo-poo the idea of overexcitabilities because I see it every single day in my classroom, and having those words to say to kids makes such a huge difference. So when I'm watching you on the panel and you handled yourself with such professionalism and you could fire back at them when they would say, well, couldn't it just be ADHD or couldn't it just be a sensory processing disorder or whatever? And I was sitting on the floor just like wanting to shake people and be like, no, that's not really the deal. And you handled yourself so well that I was pretty impressed with that. So,
well, thank you. I mean, that's very kind. It was a very high pressure situation. Although I think that I was the one saying it's ADHD too, but it's in the past. And it was so good that we had that public conversation though. Personally, I feel like that was a really important moment. And I'm glad that you were there for it. What a bonding experience. And so at NAGC this past November in 2023, we caught up again and got to have dinner at Disney Springs. And I was thinking earlier about how they, it's in Florida and they blast that soap or whatever into the air to make snow. It's a sensory nightmare.
It was awful. And I was so glad that I was with somebody who got it because we walked in and there were 9 million people in a square foot and there's soap coming from the sky and there's music and sparkling things and smells and all that. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to last very long here. And then we went and ate. And then I was like, I feel like I'm good. And you were like, yeah, let's go. I thought, oh, my people.
That's right.
This is giving me anxiety just listening to this, let alone being in it. Oh, Emma, it was so... And we had to ride on a bus to get there. We did it, though. It was an experience. And we had a great conversation, so it was worth it.
We did.
And the burger
It
was
worth
pretty
it.
good.
The burger was pretty good. It was better than the food at the hotel, so that was a win.
And it wasn't $97 for a burger.
That's right. It was more reasonably priced, too. But yeah, it was great to see you again, and you're going to be presenting at the Congress, but we'll talk about that later. Before we talk about the future, let's go back to the past for a moment, because we always kick things off, as you know, as a podcast listener, by asking, how did you first learn about Dąbrowski's theory?
To be honest, as a gifted teacher, I'm always trying to find something that helps my students understand who they are as a gifted person. You know, a lot of gifted kids feel like they're so different and so weird, or they're broken, or why do they respond this way? And for that matter, why doesn't anybody else respond that way? I think I was really looking into like sensory stuff. My work wife is a life skills teacher, and we started noticing there was a lot of massive overlaps between students with autism and the gifted kids, even if they weren't diagnosed with autism. Then we started kind of going down the rabbit hole of sensory stuff and emotional. And then I stumbled upon Mellow Out, they say, if only I could. And that has become basically my Bible for helping kids understand themselves. And parents, I should have stock in that book. I probably buy 10 every 6 months, because I just give them out to people, because they'll start talking to me about their kid. I'm like, please, just go read this book. We can talk about it, but I think it's going to be a game changer for you. And so many people have come back and this is my kid. This is my kid. I underlined this place. I highlighted this place. And so then when I saw that there were overexcitability sessions at NAGC, and when I don't remember where I heard you first say that you learned Polish just so you could read it. And I thought, this person is outside of their mind, but okay. But then I just shared with you just recently, like I was trying to figure out how to learn more. And I thought, I should probably learn Polish. Not going to do it, but I probably should.
It was 7 years ago this week that I started learning Polish. And there was kind of a break over the past year, but over the past couple weeks, actually, I've been back on Duolingo doing it because my son is a good influence, and he's been doing Duolingo and has like more than a year streak now. I've gotten too busy in my life to stay with trying to like read books and translate them and ask Michael. I'm just too busy now for it, which is sad. I need to find out how to carve out time. But it was amazing to me. You brought that up too at NAGC 22. And I'm like, are people really listening and paying attention? It blew my mind.
Well, I am. I'm paying attention. Again, I just think it's so important. And I actually asked my students, because I do a whole psychology unit. And part of that unit, we do talk about overexcitabilities, and we delve into it, and we talk about the pros and the cons and what makes it great and what makes it a struggle. And, how can I think it was in the Living with Intensities book where she talks about mitigating them. So we use that vocabulary, how do you mitigate your responses for time, place, and intensity? And we talk about those things. And the kids have just really attached to it. And they have verbiage now. They have an understanding. And I think it's made a huge difference for a lot of them. And so this morning, I actually texted a couple of kids and told them that, hey, I'm doing this podcast. What do you think of overexcitabilities, and did it help you or anything like that? And one of my favorite ones, so this kiddo, when he was in 6th grade, he was kind of difficult to like because he had a really high level of intellectual overexcitability. So in a school where he's constantly pointing out the mistakes and, oh, hey, you didn't put a period there, or did you know that you didn't capitalize that? I mean, it's a little bit bigger, but it's not really capitalized. He kind of came across a little bit like a know-it-all. And he said that it kind of helped him work through the why he does various weird things, and therefore made him less likely to blame himself when something he does is a negative social reaction. And I thought that was brilliant. I've had so many tell me that it just makes them feel like they are not broken. It's just a different wiring. And I think when they really let that sink in, it makes a huge difference for them.
I know I felt that way personally.
Yeah.
Well, and you get it personally too, not only professionally. I happen to know that you are overexcitable yourself.
Oh my gosh. And my daughter, whew, she's pretty overexcitable. And I wish I had known as a parent when she was younger, kind of what was happening and what was going on, because God, socks were just a nightmare. Doing anything, wearing socks, and then going like from winter clothes to summer clothes. And I cannot tell you how many times I caught vomit in my hands because she would get like gristle and meat. And it was such a visceral reaction. And I remember getting frustrated, like, oh my God, can't you just like put it in a napkin or, something like that? But it was so hardwired in her. And now I know that. And I just feel bad because I feel like I wasn't as understanding, when she was 3 and 4. But now I know.
Oh, if I could go back in time, I would be much more understanding with my kid as a youngster when he was like so over the top with his energy. I had a kid who just was constantly on the move.
Right. Yeah. And the intellectual one, I would say the intellectual one is the hardest one for me personally. I just have a really hard time letting things go when I have a question and I got to go find it. I'm glad I live in the era of Google, because I can't imagine what that would have been like to be, 45 in 1982. And I'm wondering, do penguins have knees? And I have to know, do penguins have knees? And the library is closed. So at
Do
least
you
there's that.
remember that we used to have to go to the library and look in the card catalog and find a book, and maybe it wouldn't even be there. They didn't
It
always
might
have
not
the
even
answer.
tell you if the penguins have knees.
And now I'm suppressing the urge to Google, do penguins have knees? Because now I need to know whether or not penguins have knees. They do have knees?
They do have knees.
Excellent. Okay, that's a weight off my mind.
Yep. Because that happens. And my students say, please don't tell us about penguins and knees, because that's the one I go to the most. Because that one was probably one of the first ones that I realized, oh my God, I can't let this go. I have to find this out, and then I also use it and say, guys, this might be a thing when you lay down and go to bed at night. You're just about to fall asleep and something absolutely ridiculous pops into your head and you can't let it go.
Mind activated.
And then all of a sudden down a rabbit hole.
Yes.
For me, though, it's good to hear you two talk about having these realizations and then reflecting on parenting in particular, because for people of our age bracket, we didn't have the advantage of that. And part of this for me is to be able to take that knowledge and also forgive my parents in a way for what they didn't know, and some of the ways that they handled me when I was a kid and how that's still playing out in my life. So I think getting this knowledge out there and, throwing a book to everybody that comes across your path is great, not only for helping the next generation, but also helping people of our vintage to reconcile some of the stuff about their past.
And I think when I've given it to some parents, it kind of relieves them too, because I think sometimes there's kind of a negative connotation that comes with, oh, your kid has ADHD. It's almost like, can't you parent your kid? Maybe they don't have ADHD. You just need to be a better parent kind of deal.
Discipline.
Right. Apparently just beat them and then they'll stop it, I guess. I don't know. But there have been several that I just observe very closely. And then I'll say, I noticed that there's this thing going on. And they say, oh, they do that at home too. And so then we try to talk about how this works at school, what works at home. And then we kind of marry the two. I have one student who he says that his feet feel like they're suffocating in shoes. And he almost always has only one shoe on in my classroom. And, the kids kind of razz him about it a little bit. Luckily, his feet don't stink. But they kind of were like, you never have your shoes on. He's like, I always have my shoes on. No, you don't. And they've started taking pictures of his feet, and he just can't stand it. And then he also is one that if he's bored, he's moving. If he's excited, he's moving. If he's learning something new, he's moving, and he's just, and I could see where that would present as ADHD. But when you see it in the windows of, he's not always like that. He does have kind of an even keel situation, but boy, when he's learning something new, he can run 5 miles in place in about 2.5 minutes.
So last night I read the last thing that my friend Frank Falk wrote last year before he passed away. And So I read Frank's paper while pacing around my kitchen last night. The entire thing. Like, I could not sit down. I just had to walk around the island in my kitchen. And I mean, it's like I don't know how many pages it was, but it wasn't short. I had like a stiff back notepad under it, and I had like a pencil for my little notes, and I would just stop periodically and make them. But yes, like, some of us need to pace. And I know that Emma's a pacer too.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why I end up doing that video on sneaky stimming, because when you're in a meeting in an office, you cannot get up and pace because it distracts everybody. So you've got to figure out some alternate way to let it out.
And from a teacher standpoint, I'm glad you brought that up, because in my classroom, I generally have pretty small groups. In one building, I only have 12 kids. And then in the other building, I only have 23, but I'll have anywhere from, 5 to 11 kids per class period. So it's really easy for me to let a kid get up and pace around, or, sit on a stability ball and just get after it. But I can see where it would be a problem for other teachers. But there are some teachers who just are not willing or interested in a kid being able to get up and move. They want them to sit down, be quiet, do what I'm telling you to do. And it's hard for me to get across to them if you just let them pace in the back of the room. They're behind everybody. They're not distracting anything. I promise you they are listening. You will get so much more out of them. A, they're going to respect you and appreciate you more because you're actually letting their needs get met. And B, they're actually going to take in more information. But when you're forcing that kid to just sit there, all they can think about is, I got to move, I got to move, I got to move, I got to move, I got to move. This chair's hard. I'm uncomfortable. But there's a stigma there.
Or your imagination then gets the better of you. That's what happens to me. I'm sitting there and my brain will start going, hey, if we can't run away physically, do you want to go somewhere mentally? I'm like, no. Got to pay attention to this PowerPoint that's different. No, come on. Fantasyland. Like, let's go slay dragons with Pedro Pascal or something. Like, that's way more appealing.
Anything with Pedro Pascal is more appealing.
Oh, hell yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And from the school standpoint, so many gifted kids have already learned the material. So that imagination piece and that kind of they're thinking about other things is huge. I have one kid who knows everything there is to know about roller coasters, velocity, all of it. He knows all of it. And in 6th grade, they were working on force and motion. Well, he already knows force and motion. So if you're not going to give him something different, like you just said, he's going to drift off and he's imagining the Mamba roller coaster. And, not only is he riding it in his head, he's probably making some changes to it. And then you want him to come back in and say gravitational pull or something, like fill in some blank. Well, he's well beyond that. I wish teachers would be a little bit more open to kind of some of the quirkinesses, I guess, of gifted kids, and not just think that they're that stereotypical blonde hair, blue-eyed white boy. They've got other things going on.
Well-behaved white boy. That's right.
I forgot that. Yeah.
So when you were talking about letting kids like pace in the back of your classroom, I thought about what a game changer that would have been for me in middle school. Middle school was the time, I feel like in elementary school, I was tolerated because there was like a cloakroom in our classroom. So my teacher would always be like, let's stick your desk back here. You can read the dictionary. And that is literally what I did in one year. So anyway, by middle school, the only thing to do, because that cloakroom situation was gone, was to exit my classroom and walk in the hall and walk in the hall and walk in the hall. And so I would do that and just walk around. Like, it would have been a game changer to just be allowed to move in my own classroom. Like, I love that you get this and let your students have that kind of autonomy and ability to honor their needs and not make it something wrong with them.
We have a lot of things in the classroom that are specifically designed for, or I guess maybe not designed for, but take into account the various things we might encounter as gifted people with overexcitabilities. Of course, I use Christmas lights. I don't use the big overhead lights. I've been known to climb up the ladder and take the big, incandescent bulbs out. And the custodians will be like, oh, I'll do that. Okay, well, it's killing my kids right now. They're very sensitive to, we actually have a little mini fridge in the room because a hungry kid can't learn, but every once in a while it'll kick on, and it kind of does that hum and whatever. And the kids will notice right away. So, I have to know that when that kicks on, I kind of scan the room. Okay, is it kind of bothering anybody or can we move on? Several kids who can't stand even the texture of the chairs, who are ultra competitive. That's probably the one that I find the most interesting about the overexcitabilities is the competitiveness, and that belongs in the psychomotor area. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but there's a lot of gifted kids that don't know how to lose. And I think it comes from, clearly overexcitabilities, but also they're just always good at everything. So they never have to learn how to lose. So we actually do a big event, which is a whole nother side story, but we do the Gifted Olympics in our district. Another teacher and I put it together, and 150 kids come and they compete in various games that kind of all, over the place. And it's pretty great, Chris. You and I should talk about that someday because, I mean, it hits every OE, it hits every type of intelligence, but most importantly for us, our number one goal was we wanted our gifted kids to know that they're not an island and there are other people out there who are like them. And this is a way for them to kind of get to know each other and see each other and be able to compete, learn how to win and lose gracefully, also how to train. So gifted kids, since they don't really have to do homework, they don't really know how to study. So we train for games.
Huh. Well, so, okay, the Gifted Olympics. On the one hand, I love the idea of that. But on the other hand, I'm listening to you talk about it and remembering how it went at camp. Because at UNASA, oh my gosh, they had to stop having the Camper Olympics because it was so competitive. And in 2021, I was a counselor in my group. The tears, I mean, I had like multiple kids crying because they weren't doing well in this event. And then we ended up like coming in last, I think, of all the groups. And whoa, the emotions, it was like, I'm like trying to convey to them, this is the Camper Olympics. This is not high stakes, but it was so high stakes for them.
You're right. We haven't had any massive meltdowns. Like we've had, sad and disappointed and that kind of thing. But we all kind of rally around. There are 10 of the teachers who bring their kids. And we just kind of rally around a kid if they look like they're sad or brought down or whatever and say, listen, this is truly the Olympics. And I don't know the ages of, so it ranges, right?
Yeah, it was probably 10 to 16 that year or something.
Okay.
But of course, the 16-year-olds weren't crying. But, maybe some of the teenagers were. I'd have to look in my journal and see who it was.
Yeah. But we really try to rally around. And through the training, we also, because we do qualifiers, the kids don't just get to sign up for whatever game. Like you have to make it into the game. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of work through some of those feelings in the beginning. We do have a couple of kiddos they didn't want to compete last year at all. They didn't even come last year. There's one girl I'm thinking about. She's brilliant, but she's also the only African-American female in her group, in her building. And so she felt like she was going to be the only African-American female at the whole thing. And she was like, no, I'm not doing it. So she didn't want to compete at all, didn't want to come at all. So she didn't. And then this year she's going to compete in one game. She's going to come and she's going to compete in one game. But through those qualifiers, we can kind of support the kids, help them work through those emotions, in a smaller setting. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I love about the Olympics is watching some of the kids rally around kids they don't even know. And, somebody takes a loss really hard and they say, you know what, you're in 7th grade, you could come back next year. And now you know how to play this game. And now you know how you can try to beat me next year, So that was a worry for us. But it's thus far, knock on wood, fingers crossed, et cetera, it's been a positive experience. The kids really look forward to it. And there are some that get overwhelmed, but we also have a couple of spaces in our Olympic Village that are just a little more quiet. They can kind of tuck back into, some curtains, like it's in a theater. So they can kind of tuck back into the curtain, then it kind of muffles the sound. They don't have to be around anybody if they don't need to. So the Olympics is kind of my baby.
Nice. It makes sense to me that it's working well. while I have this thread, I want to bring this up because this is an important thing to talk about. When we were having our conversation at NAGC last November, and we talked about diversity and just what you've seen working with gifted kids of color, especially, and the pushback on them potentially being gifted and, and just like the racism that you've seen.
It's thick. And I honestly don't think that anybody does it on purpose, but I think we're battling X number of years of people thinking that blonde hair, blue eyed, well behaved white kid is gifted. I just literally about 2 weeks ago had a team meeting regarding a Hispanic female, and she is sassy and she does not necessarily present as a gifted kid because she does exactly what she is asked. That's it. And she's more involved in like her social life, which makes sense because her culture is more of a community-based culture. And in the team meeting, one of the teachers said something like, well, she doesn't want to do any extra work. She doesn't go above and beyond on assignments. She's kind of always in some level of drama. And I said, okay, what would you expect? And she said, I would expect that she always turns in her work on time, that she wants to learn more, she asks more questions, and that she knows better than to get in the drama. And I said, none of those are going to work with every single kid. What you're talking about is that kid who sits in their desk with their hands folded, raises their hand and say, "Ooh, I know the answer, Miss Teacher." And it just doesn't work that way. I had another student whose family, he's first generation. Actually, he moved here from Cameroon when he was 3. And in 6th grade, because he was quiet and he was respectful, but he didn't really go above and beyond, the 6th grade team was like, he's not gifted. And I'm like, I kind of feel like he is. No, he's not. Gets to 7th grade, and the 7th grade teachers are like, so did you ever look at him? I said, I tried, but they wouldn't let me because in our area, it's a team decision. I can't just decide that I want to work with this kid. It's got to be the team. Everybody says yes, or at least the majority. And they said, well, we'll let you. I work with this kid. Turns out he speaks 2 languages. He's developed some kind of online game thing similar to Dungeons and Dragons, I guess, where everybody's got this power and this injury thing and whatever. And turned out when we tested him on the almighty IQ test, he killed it. And I just thought, that's another one who could have fallen through the cracks. I see it. We have a very high Hispanic population. So I think we miss a lot. And it's hard. It breaks my heart.
The team approach where everybody has to agree or the majority has to agree, it's interesting to me because it's so easy to hide giftedness. So easy. It's easy to underachieve on tests. It's easy to not, it's interesting to me to even think that going above and beyond would be an indicator because, I can tell you how little I went and above and beyond for school.
Just going to check the box. It's the number one word. Right. The number one word used by my kids is it's annoying. But yeah.
Something to be endured.
Yes. And, I think I told you this. I love educating. I hate education. And people say, well, why do you even teach then? Because if I don't, who will? Who is going to help my gifted kids understand who they are? And who's going to give them that 1 hour a day where we can actually meet their needs, whatever those needs might be? Because I can't guarantee anybody else can do it. I know I can, so I do.
I'm glad they have you. It's like having an advocate. It can be life or death. Having an adult who gets you, who sees you, being seen in that way. That absolutely saved my life when I was in middle school. I had one teacher who was there for me. And interestingly, when I was in 7th grade, I really clashed with my gifted teacher. And part of the problem I realized in retrospect is that the transition between elementary and middle school for me was traumatic. To have to leave that school, I was so attached to it, the teachers, everything there was so familiar. To go to the middle school, it was on the other side of town. I was bused there instead of being a walker. It was such a dramatic change. And I really struggled in 7th grade. So in 7th grade, my gifted teacher was like, "Oh, why are you even here?" I got kicked out of honors because I wasn't performing. But I didn't get kicked out of gifted because, I was gifted. And that was evident to them, even though I wasn't doing well in the classroom. But in 8th grade, at the beginning of the year, my teacher, he advocated for me by the end of the first quarter with the gifted teacher, sat us down together and was like, "You guys have to find a way to get along. You have to open your mind to her and all of this. And, and you have to give this kid a chance." And I mean, it really turned things around. That did get her to open her eyes to me and give me another chance. And it gave me the opportunity to do that with her. And it worked. And I mean, I reached out to her during my autoethnography and everything. And it was so interesting to hear from her that she had been taught that giftedness looked one way, and she was disappointed by me. She was like, "We were told that you were like some genius kid and you came in and did nothing." She was like, "Not only did you not perform, but you were rude. You were a tough kid." And she was like, "I'm sorry that that's the way I was trained, that I didn't know how to be there for you until Mr. Harrison stepped in. And it was just so cool to be able to have that conversation with her. And so I appreciate you and what you're doing. I mean, I just feel like I understand it so well, how important it is.
Well, I think I shared this story with you at the last NAGC, but this story will forever stick with me. I had a Hispanic male student, and I've asked him if I can share his story and yell it from the mountaintops. And he's like, "I don't really think it's that big deal, but yeah, you can." And of course, he's in a gifted class, so I knew he was gifted, but I don't really put a lot of stock in oh, what did your testing show and what's, all of that. But I always knew that he was pretty significant. And he was right-handed, he injured his wrist, and we went outside to play because kids need to play sometimes. And he picked up a tennis ball and started throwing it with accuracy within about 3 tosses. And I was like, wait a minute, I know baseball. And that nobody can just pick up a ball and throw it like that, left-handed, and you're right side dominant. And he goes, "Miss Cowick, it's just physics and geometry." And I was, okay, whatever. So fast forward, he had an English teacher and a science teacher who were besties. And I didn't know this happened until after the fact, but on the same day, the language arts teacher pulled him out of class and said something to the effect of, "You're gifted, right?" And he said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Yeah, I'm not seeing it." As a motivator, I guess that was supposed to be. And he was like, "Okay, what's a 13-year-old boy going to say to a teacher in that situation?" Science teacher also pulled to him and said, "Yeah, I've heard words like brilliant used to describe you. I struggled to see why." And I thought, are you kidding me? When I found out about this, I was hot. And I asked him, "Did this happen?" And he said, "Yeah." He just kind of brushed it off or whatever. And I said, "What are you going to do? What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do anything for them ever again." I said, "Okay, but your mom and dad, they want you to keep your grades up." He goes, "I'm going to figure out exactly how to get an A, and that's all I'm doing." I said, "Cool." So he actually got an 89.9 in his language arts class, which on the report card rounded up to a 90%, which is an A. And I thought, this kid, are you kidding me? He's now 20 years old and has had 6 businesses. He opens a business, learns what he wants out of it, and then closes it. But he doesn't have time for college because he can't put 100% of his effort into his businesses if he's in college.
Not everybody has to go to college, even if you're gifted.
The only reason I told him he should go to college is he wants to do international business. So some degree would help, kind of grease those wheels.
Look, I'm actually glad this got brought up because it leads me to something that I've been sitting on overexcitably and wanting to ask about. The reason why I dropped out of university was I couldn't afford it. Right? It was a choice between work and pay your bills or pursue this degree, which I wasn't 100% sure that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I just wanted to ask Summer, are there any particular challenges that kids from low-income areas have? Because I know my school experience was just it's so cookie cutter. Even when I was in kindergarten and I was misbehaving and shit because I was bored out of my skull and my parents got called into the classroom. The teacher's like, she can't focus and she distracts all the other kids and blah, 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 blah. My dad went, what are you giving her for work? I went, she is bored. Like, if why don't you just jump her up a couple of years? And they're like, oh, well, we can't do that. And it'll affect her socialization and blah, blah, blah. And Dad just went, if you're going to bore the fuck out of her, her behavior is your problem. Goodbye. But that, like, when it's so rigid and like round peg, round hole, like, particularly in low income areas where there's not the resources maybe to expand the thinking around this stuff, surely that's got to present some unique challenges as well.
Absolutely. So for the college standpoint, it is very difficult. We have a lot of kids who are first generation in this country. And so by the time they get into college, their parents have no idea what even the options are. As a matter of fact, the same kid who opened all the businesses, he called me or he texted me in July and said, can we talk preferably face to face? And I thought, oh God, what happened? And he just said, I don't know how to do college. And I said, what do you mean you don't know how to do college? And he said, nobody in high school walked anybody through like what you're supposed to do. It's just kind of, I guess everybody else just knows, but I don't know. And I said, so nobody talked you through like how to get scholarships, how to look for a major or a school that you might like. And he said the only school that he thought he might want to go to is BYU because he's very active in his church. And he thought maybe that might be a thing. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, business. I said, so you want to get a business degree? He said, that's a degree? And I said, yes. So we sat down and we kind of got him, looking at scholarships and, okay, you're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this. He only stayed for a semester. But to your point about, is there a difficulty there? 100%. So many of our kids, not even the gifted ones, just across the board, they just feel like they're going to grow up and work with their parents. Maybe their dad is doing some level of construction or something, and they'll tell you that's what they're going to do when they get older. They're going to do the construction thing. And so I always say to them, but wouldn't you rather run the construction business than do all the heavy lifting? And a lot of times, they have this look on their face like they had never even thought that that would be a thing. They look at you like, oh yeah, I guess I could. Yes, I would actually rather do that than, have drywall dust up my nose every night. So I spend a lot of time talking to kids about that. And it is a missing thing for a lot of our first generation families.
You described one kid, his brilliance being questioned, and then you're telling me about helping a kid see a future that they might not be able to see for themselves just because, when you don't have those models necessarily around you, you're not going to think like that. And so, doing that is so huge. And it just struck me to hear you say that the difference between someone saying, you're not, I thought you were supposed to be gifted, or, you're not as brilliant as I thought you were, and saying, you can do so much more than you think you can even do. Like the difference, it's giving me goosebumps. Like I noticed that like my heart rate is going up while we're talking because this just is obviously such an emotionally charged subject for me.
I think when I'm teaching my kids, I go from a strength-based approach as opposed to a deficit approach, which our school system, I feel like, just drowns in the deficit approach. And then we wonder, side note, why the kids always have like mental health issues. Oh, I don't know, because we tell you every day you're not good enough and that you have to test better and study more and do work harder and, just be better than you are every single day. And then we wonder why they don't feel good about themselves. But I come from a strength-based approach where, okay, maybe you have to move all the time, but when you move, you give me good stuff. Okay, I'm here for it. Like it doesn't have to be my way. And maybe math is your jam. Okay, so for example, we did a lesson that I saw on a Facebook page where they did like child-sized hangers and they made snowflakes out of them with radial symmetry. So we talked about radial symmetry and then engineering and STEM and pulled all that together. And then the final piece was they had to do a writing piece on it, like a persuasive writing on which one was their favorite and why. And I said, if you are a math person, you're going to pull in every math piece of that into your writing. And that I like it because it has this degree of radial symmetry. I like it because it seems balanced and whatever. So I try to use those to support the areas that maybe they're not as strong in, because nobody likes to feel stupid. Gifted kids especially don't like to feel stupid. They get really upset about that. But if I can use that math part, and say, oh, maybe your creative intro to your writing is a math equation. Because we numbered the snowflakes. My favorite snowflake is 2 to the second divided by 4 over 9x. I don't know what. Do it. And then it kind of loosens them up a little bit. But I've read and just used strength-based approaches so often, and I see so much growth out of them.
And I think importantly too, you're talking to passions, right? Overexcitable people with passionate, emotive, creative people. And this whole thing of what does success look like keeps coming back at me, because whether or not you're talking about underachieving in the classroom, or your version of giftedness doesn't look like what the teacher expects, or what do you want to do with yourself after you leave school? I distinctly remember when I was about 14 or 15, my dad randomly called me into his room, and he's there balling up his socks from the laundry and putting them in the drawer, and just out of nowhere asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I went, okay, this is random, but I thought, he's asking me honestly, I'll give him an honest answer. And I was a kid who, Billy Connolly was my absolute idol, and I love public speaking. So my answer was, well, I want to be a stand-up comedian. And being working class, my dad's response was, don't be stupid. That's not a real career. You won't make money out of that. The whole working class, you need to pay your bills first and foremost. And success is making money, right? Whether or not you hate the job or not. And he's like, why don't you get a degree and be a lawyer? And I quipped back, don't be stupid. That's not a real career. And then I got in trouble for sassing him. And then we had that conversation, the working class lecture of success looks like paying your bills and success looks like making money, and didn't matter whether or not it made me miserable or whether or not it was following my passions. There's that idea of success must be this, gifted must be this, and completely lose focus on what drives this person, what makes them passionate, because we all know when we're passionate about something we do better at it, but people seem to just forget that idea.
Well, because it's more important to know the Pythagorean theorem. Don't you know that? I find education to be so obnoxious. I just feel like there's so many ways that kids could be awesome adults without having to do algebraic equations and calculus and statistics. And I'm picking on math right now just because those are the classes that my daughter gets upset about. But we can still work all those things in. And that's where, as a gifted teacher, I have a lot of leeway. I have the best gig in the district because I don't have a curriculum. I get to meet the kids. So in our state, they are on individualized education plans. So each one, I can do whatever. But I try to keep it really vague because anybody who's ever worked with kids knows they change their interests and their ideas about as often as they change their underwear, we hope. So I don't want to put, they're going to do all math things. And then now, I want to try writing, right? So I also teach them how to abandon something. This isn't working for you. There's a time to dig in and persevere and be gritty and get after it. But there's also a time to let it go. And as an adult, if I need to learn about penguins and knees, I'm not doing a project over it when I'm done. I know penguins have knees. I'm done now. So we actually do something. A couple of my kids are doing something called learning journals. They're the kids with those real high intellectual OEs that just have a bazillion questions. So they just have they can do it digitally or handwritten, and they just start with one question a day. Well, I researched this, and then, I found out this and this and this and this. And then you can almost see their track of their thinking. You can follow the rabbit hole. And it's kind of fun to say, oh, look at that. You started off with watermelon and ended up with octopus. That's interesting. But it's satisfying that intellectual OE. They're able to follow that that rabbit hole, and then they end up knowing 10 things as opposed to one if they were just doing one project over one thing. So again, I've got the best gig because I do get to do whatever the kids are interested in. But I'll tell you this, when they come to me as a sixth grader, they're terrified of that. When I ask them, what do they want to know? They're like, well, what do you want me to do? No.
That's right. Quitting such a taboo. And like
Mhm.
learning how to let go of watermelon in order to get to octopus is it's actually a really important life skill. The amount of times you need to let go appears in my personal journal from working on myself. It's crazy. But we don't realize the harm that some of this conditioning stuff does to people to say, oh, no, you pick one thing. Like when you're 18, you pick a degree, you go down that path and you stay with it forever and you are trapped. If you fail high school, you have no other options and your life will end. Like, just the thinking around it's so not what the real world is.
That's how I try to run my group. My kids don't have to ask me to go to the bathroom. They don't have to ask me if they can eat a snack. My one rule in the classroom is you can do anything you want in here as long as it doesn't cause a problem for anybody else. Straight from love and logic. And they get really excited first. And then I say, okay, you can eat in here, but you can't leave your trash. You can go to the bathroom anytime you want because I am not in charge of that system of your body. And some of them really struggle with but I need to ask you. Listen, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear. I have to go to the bathroom because I have a visual brain and I don't need to think about that. And they love being treated like people.
My gifted class was so different than the other classes because of what you're describing. There was no curriculum. And so, we had to do a project, a year-long project. And as a group, we would sometimes do things together. But for the most part, we were working on a project all year, which was great for me. But it sucked at the end of the year in a way because I was like studying it the way I wanted. And my topic was never what my teacher thought I should do. Like in 7th grade, I explored the history of rock and roll. That's what I was interested in. I wanted to be a musician. That was where my passion was. And so I spent the whole year studying that. But then at the end of the year, I got up and kind of just described a bunch of, I talked about the history, but not like in a way that they wanted me to. It wasn't, they were like, there's no creativity here. Like, you have just studied this. And I was like, I didn't know it had to be like creative. I've spent the whole year, like I knew so much. It could just tell you about every band and who played for them and all their albums. And I was like an encyclopedia of shit. But that's not what they wanted from me. They were like, you're supposed to be giving like, it didn't fit. All the other kids were presenting on like more important topics, right? And it was that kind of thing was such a soul crushing end of year reception to the thing that I had like passionately studied all year.
When again, they tried to fit you into their peg or their hole, right? That this is what I was expecting out of you. And I have my kids come up with their own scoring so that I know exactly what I'm looking for. What, like for your rock and roll thing, what am I looking for? Am I looking for number of facts, number of bands? Am I looking at how you're presenting it? What am I looking for here? And then point me in that direction. This is you doing it. I also always offer what I call wow points. So however they can make me say wow or be impressed, then they can get extra points. And I tell them all the time, I am gifted and I have taught gifted for a while, so good luck. And then they step up, and I've had some really cool stuff. I just had a kid made a creature that, like, she sewed the whole thing together and she created this whole timeline and life with it, and then it lights up and all of and I'm like, oh, that's a wow right there, because I don't even know what's happening, but I like it. We're good. And I have one girl every single day. She doesn't have a mom in her life. Every single day when she leaves my class, I say, love you, bye. She says, love you, bye. And then before she leaves school, every single day, she pops in my room and says, love you, bye. I say, love you, bye. Every single day. So if there's nothing else I'm doing good in my life, I hope it's that I'm helping kids actualize not just their potential, but who they are.
It's really important to have somebody to care about, even, I was going to say even at school, but why not at school too? I mean, for me, it was so about the relationships at school, always, much more than the content of what I was learning. And so I really resonate with what you're saying about being a
Yeah.
teacher. I don't mean to hijack it at all with my own stories, but talking to you tonight is just really bringing that up for me. It's interesting. My 8th grade project, by the way, the history of rock and roll was 7th grade. 8th grade was heavy metal censorship because that was like the Tipper Gore time. And, I was all fired up about that. But again, like, they were like, what? You're going to spend the whole year again on like heavy metal? Like, well, that's what I was interested in. And the other big interest I had was drugs. So I saved that for high school.
Emma's
5,000.
like, I see no problem here with the heavy metal.
Absolutely not. 5,000 word essay on why Dee Snider is the best.
Dee Snider, Twisted Sister, 4th grade. I remember that.
Well, to your point about teachers and, the relationships, I was identified in like end of 4th grade, going into 5th grade to be gifted. And I am still in touch with my gifted teacher from when I was a kid. And she told me that my 4th grade teacher fought against me to be in the gifted program because I was disorganized, because I was a little sassy. I didn't really like basically jumping through hoops. And so she really fought against me. But luckily, my gifted teacher kind of understood it and figured it out. And so because of that, I think that was the beginning of my personal journey of being able to go through life a little bit differently because I grew up in South St. Louis, right on the Mississippi River. And so it was a pretty low income area. And I only graduated with 55 people, which sounds weird in a city of that size, but we were kind of landlocked kind of deal. But they didn't have any idea what to do with us as gifted kids. We had a gifted class when we were in 5th and 6th grade. And then when we went to junior high, they thought, well, we don't know what to do with you. How about go take chemistry? So we walked across the street or down the street to the high school and took chemistry as 7th graders. And then they also put us in a journalism class, which that was one of the best experiences ever. We had the same teacher for 5 years. And by the time our senior year came around, I had that same teacher, again, small school, for 3 hours a day. And he got it and he understood it. So by the time we got up into high school, we kind of had been, for lack of a better phrase, a little bit tracked together into some of those high classes. But I'm not mathematically inclined. So when they put us in chemistry and then they wanted us in algebra in like 7th grade, and it was too much for me, but they didn't know what to do with us. So they were like, hey, this group of 8 kids they're gifted and smart. I know chemistry. I put you in chemistry. But without those 2 teachers, Dr. Sandy Fabrizi and Bob Burnt, I don't know that I would have been able to really take my giftedness and actualize my own giftedness. And I probably wouldn't be a teacher without those 2.
That's what I was going to say. I figured there must be inspiration for being a teacher. And so I'm so glad that you brought that up and shared them with us.
Yeah, Mr. Burnt used to tell us all the time, if you don't know, think. And it got on my nerves because I was like, of course I'm thinking, but I still don't know it. Like, what are you even saying? If you don't know, think. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But now as an adult, I get it. Like, go think about it in a different way. Think around it. Come up from behind it. Come from a different angle. Those kinds of things. But I will never forget that. Just how annoyed I would be when he would say, when you don't know, think. Man, shut up.
I want to ask you, though, before we wrap up, I mean, I just feel like right now it's a tough time for teachers. Can you talk more about the challenges of being a teacher? And I feel from you how fortunate you feel, I think, to be a gifted teacher, if I'm hearing you right. I'm so glad that you have that opportunity. I know there's so many states that don't even have gifted programs.
Yeah.
So please tell us about the education experience right now, if you don't mind. Because in the U.S., it feels bad, terrible.
I'm not going to lie. The world is on fire. Being a gifted teacher in a state that requires an IEP but doesn't fund the districts is really difficult. We have some teachers in our district who are gifted teachers who are responsible for 4 elementary schools. So not only are they having to go and service those gifted kids, but they're also trying to identify gifted kids while also working with teams to help them differentiate for gifted kids. And again, we're coming from that deficit approach. So most of the time, the gifted kids, it's not even on their radar. Unfortunately, in the middle schools, I see a lot of kids who just need parenting. And I know there are a lot of parents, particularly where I work in the low income schools, the parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, just trying to make ends meet. But then you have kids running amok. And then we flip that coin over and we have litigious parents who want to sue for nothing, or that want to, my baby couldn't possibly have done that. Well, we have it on video. No, who made her do that? Who made him do that? We also, even in the middle school, have a lot of vaping. So my gifted kids, we have this conversation a lot. At what point do we start worrying about the kids who want to learn, who want to go above and beyond, who are there to get their education more than the kids who are running amok? Because my gifted kids are often in classes with kids who want nothing to do with being there. The teacher ends up spending a lot of time trying to manage behaviors, and my kids just kind of end up sitting. So I kind of look at my hour as their one respite hour where, hey, let's dig in. Let's go where you want it to go. I feel like with COVID, we had the prime time to change education, to make it better, for kids, to change the whole system. Burn it down, start over, build something new. But clearly that didn't happen. Teachers are tired, and I will always know my why of teaching, but sometimes the other stuff doesn't balance out. It gets to be so much. And I actually had a kid tell me yesterday, Ms. Cowick, you look so much happier now than you were at the beginning of the year. And I said, I stopped caring about paperwork. It's kind of tough. Yeah. I mean, I have my IEPs and my evaluation reports. I had one evaluation report that was 88 pages for one kid. It's a lot.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. And my IEPs run 18 pages. So
yeah.
I ended up being a secretary.
Oh, that's terrible. That's how I used to feel about social work when I was a caseworker. The paperwork is what killed me more than anything else.
And it sucked the life out of me being a teacher. I wasn't able to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm a teacher. I'm not a paper pusher. I'm not a, whatever. I'm not a secretary. I'm a teacher. Let me teach. Let me work with my kids. Let me make a difference with them. That's what we all want to do. There's just a lot of other things that go into it now. But I love my kids.
You can tell. We don't respect teachers enough. Teachers don't have the right working environment in this country, and it just seems like a crisis to me. And I really just want to say how much I respect you and admire you for doing your work. I know it must be so challenging, and I'm glad that you came on and talked about it, because I know that we have plenty of teachers who listen to the podcast, and I'm just realizing, listening to you, that we haven't represented enough for education when we talk about positive disintegration, because really our system right now is in a unilevel disintegration, and it's just being recycled and recycled and recycled. And like you said, we had a chance to create change and haven't. And that's true about multiple systems that we're dealing with, of course. And I'm so glad that you came out and talked with us, and that we were able to hit some of the points we made. And we'll have to have you come back again and talk more about this, because it's important. So thanks so much.
I feel like we barely even hit OEs, but there's a lot there.
There's a lot there still. I know we only touched on it, but I think that talking about these challenges for the gifted population is just as important.
I agree 100%. People just don't get it.
All this does actually represent something that's key in the theory of positive disintegration, because whether or not we're talking about allowing kids to express their overexcitabilities in the classroom, or we're talking about what giftedness looks like, or definitions of success, or the cookie cutter model of education, or even allowing teachers to do their very best, it comes back to authenticity. and allowing people to be the best version of themselves and not trying to cram everybody into the round hole that's only designed for round pegs. So if your education's going to move out of that uni level space, they're going to have to think about how to change that round hole model. And if we're ever going to do the best with overexcitable or gifted kids, we're going to have to change how we think about the importance of authenticity and allowing people to pursue passions and be who they're really supposed to be, and recognizing that all those who they're supposed to be are going to be different for everybody.
And just because they're gifted doesn't mean they're going to be that round peg. They're just
That's right. They're square. We know because they're gifted, right? Like they have this neurodivergence. They're different.
And we kind of, to loop back to the OEs quickly, I think when kids understand that they are neurodivergent, that their brain is just wired completely differently, and it's not based on a choice, that particularly with OEs, you are just wired to respond in a certain kind of way. It almost frees them to be who they are, kind of what you were just saying about authentic. And, then it frees them up to actualize their potential, because now they're not trying to fix something that's broken. Now they're just being who they are.
Stop trying to be normal. It's never going to work. And it's boring. That's right.
I tell them all the time, I've seen normal and I'm bored by it.
Normalcy is an illusion, and you're never going to find happiness there. I will repeat this, and this is the hill I will die on, because the more we try to move away from our authenticity to try and fit in the cookie cutter mold, the unhappier we're going to be. But we think happiness lies in that direction. Stop trying to fix the part we think is broken when it's not. Move away from perceived normalcy and towards authenticity, and that way lies happiness.
Well said.
Well, I'm game to come back anytime you guys want. You know how to get a hold of me. I'll be at the North Carolina conference in March. And then I got a workshop in April. I don't know. I got some stuff coming up. But
the Dąbrowski Congress.
But I'll always make time for you guys, because I really do, all joking aside, like OEs really was a life changer for me. And I think it's been a life changer for how I teach my class, and even how I parent my daughter, and even how I give myself permissions to say, okay, that's your intellectual overexcitability. It doesn't mean it's not real, but let's name it and claim it, and then we can move forward.
Well, and I hope to see you at NAGC in Seattle too.
Yeah,
I hope to be in your audience this time. Yeah. Well, I'm not presenting, so I can't wait to go and just enjoy myself without the pressure of presenting. It's going to be so nice. But yeah, thanks so much for presenting in the Congress with us this year. So yay.
I got to take this hour and 15-minute thing and go, zoop, we'll get it in there. But I'll really stick to OEs then.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what you produce for the Congress. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate your time.
Anytime. You guys just let me know.
And Chris, thank you too. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. It is always a pleasure.
And thank you too, listeners. We really appreciate you being with us today. Summer is a St. Louis native. St. Louis, isn't it? Summer is a St. Louis native.
I just want to say, I'm from America. I've never heard St. Louis, so you may want to say St. Louis.
But I kind of like the way she said it. It makes it sound classier.
But I don't think it's correct. So
it's not. It's St. Louis. If you're gonna you got to make it sound very American.
My brain's like Louis the 14th and that sort of thing. I'm like, that's not how you pronounce that, Emma. But what do I know? I'm Australian. We pronounce everything shit.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, at least we're laughing to begin with. That's always a nice way to kick things off.
So we train for games. Now, if my students listen to this and then they say they're hip to my game, you got to cut that part out. Cut that out. They can't know that training and homework is the same thing.
Not everybody has to go to college. Even if you're gifted, Emma. What? I mean, we don't have to leave that in, but I mean,
thanks.
You don't have
for reminding me.
Well, no, but it's a good thing.
standpoint, like, is there any particular challenges that gifteds have? Are there any?
We can leave that in. There was something else I was going to say there too, but I can't remember what it was. Into the abyss.
What does success look like? What does success look like?
Bione would say, when you don't know, think. Man, shut up. And I'm going to send him this podcast. You better leave that part in there. Because I grew up in South St. Louis. South St. Louis. See what I did there, Emma?
Continue your path to authenticity through the links in the show notes. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter for stacks of cool things delivered straight to your inbox. Explore the Dąbrowski Centre, email us, or join us on social media. And don't forget to show your love by liking, subscribing, grabbing some positive Disintegration merch, or leaving us a rating or review on your podcast platform.